Can you please state your name for me?
Yes, Najla Najieb.
What college did you graduate from?
Well, I graduated from 3 colleges actually. The first one was TSU, where I received my bachelor's degree, and then I graduated from the University of New Mexico, where I got my master's degree, and then I graduated from TSU again, where I got my doctorate degree.
When and where were you born?
I was born in Houston, Texas.
How did your family get to Texas?
My family was born here in Texas. This is where they've always lived, in Houston, Texas.
What do you remember about your childhood?
I remember the neighborhood where I grew up was a small neighborhood, and it was kind of compressed. There weren't a lot of people. It was small, but I remember that my mom was like the matriarch of our small community. The people there always came to her. They would knock on the door and they would want to see her, to ask her questions about any personal issues they had, or if they were sick with something, or just advice. They would always go to her because they looked to her as being the person in the neighborhood who was smart and knew a lot of things and had studied a lot, so they always came there. Sometimes I remember there would be a line. There would be people sitting in waiting for her in the living room. So I was accustomed to seeing the people in the neighborhood all the time. We were all pretty closely knit. So I basically remember that about my childhood. I had one sister and 3 brothers. The one closest to me, who's 3 years older than I am, was always antagonizing me, and we were always arguing and fighting. So I remember that too. But we, of course, grew out of that as we got older.
Did your parents ever discuss race or racism with you?
No, they really didn't. It was pretty much a matter of fact that whites were considered superior to blacks, and we just kind of, it seemed like everybody accepted it. And during that time, when I was growing up, everything was segregated. I mean, you even had to sit at the back of the bus. So that's how far back when I was a child, that's how it was.
What kind of interaction did you have with people not of your racial background?
Well, I remember a couple of actually incidents, I call them. I went to the grocery store with my mom. She would go every Saturday to go grocery shopping, and she would usually take me with her. And while she was shopping, I was thirsty, and I said, well, I'm going to go and get some water from the water fountain. And back then they had water fountains that were labeled white and black. So when I went to the water fountain where it was okay, colored, that's what it said, not black, I'm sorry, colored. Well, then when I went to that fountain and I pressed the lever, the water just barely came up just above the mouthpiece, not even above it, and I wasn't going to put my mouth on that. Mm-hmm. So I went to the other one that said it was for whites, and it was flowing just fine, water coming up high. So I started drinking out of that one, and along comes the store manager, the grocery store manager, and he looked at me and he said, little girl, don't you see that that's not for colored people, that's for white, and you're not supposed to drink out of that? And I said, I put my hand on my little skinny hip at that time, and I said, my mother is shopping in this grocery store, and she is spending money to pay for them, and her money is the same color as white people's money. I said, so I think I should be able to drink out of this fountain if I'm thirsty, and that's what it is. So about that time, a little crowd had gathered, and my mom came quickly, and she got me by the hand and she said, "Excuse me." And so she just walked away with me, and she was just telling me, "Now listen, you have got to stop this. You, you just can't say everything that you think or that comes to your mind." And I said, "Well, you do spend money in here, and your money is green just like their money is green." And I was done with it. So anyway, that was one instance.
What notable moment in American history sticks out most in your memory?
I would probably say the shooting of Martin Luther King and the shooting of President Kennedy. That stands out in my mind, especially back then when I was when I was still young.
Where were you? How did you respond? And how did people around you respond?
Well, when Martin Luther King was shot, I was at home with my family. And so, of course, we were all shocked and horrified, actually, at what had happened. And it was just a terrible feeling, just a very terrible feeling right in my chest. I just felt almost like I had lost someone that I knew personally, but of course I didn't know him personally. When President Kennedy was killed, I was at the doctor's. It was like a clinic where I was, and my mom had taken me there. I had a problem with my tonsillitis, and they had the TVs on, and then we heard about that he had been shot and killed. And everybody around in that clinic some people were crying and screaming, and just, it was terrible. I was crying. It was such a sad situation, and I'll never forget that. Never forget that.
What advice would you give young people today?
The first thing I would say is to take advantage of your time, the time that you have now. Utilize your time so that you don't waste it. Don't waste time doing anything that does not sustain you, basically. That's one of the things.
What made you choose Texas Southern?
Actually, living here in Houston, I wanted to attend an HBCU that was close to where I live. I didn't want to have to move to another city or another state, so I chose TSU because it was right here in Houston, and I had visited the campus before I enrolled, and I thought that it had kind of an exciting atmosphere on campus during that time, and it was a happy time at TSU, and I saw a lot of people, students out on the Tiger Walk. I was just thrilled at the excitement on this campus, so that's what really made me, enroll at this university.
What was your major?
My major was English. English was a big deal in my home, in my household, because my mother was adamant about us speaking correct English. We could not get away with something like not having subject-verb agreement. I mean, you had to speak clearly, distinctly. These are her words: clearly, distinctly, and your grammar had to be perfect. So I went into English. I felt comfortable with it. I was a good writer.
Who would you identify as important teachers, role models, or significant figures you encountered?
In the College of Education, I would say Dr. Bailey Perry, Danita Bailey Perry. She was sort of like a mentor for me through the doctoral program. I also chose her as the chair of my dissertation committee during that time, and also Dr. Lillian Potes. She was an excellent teacher. I learned a lot of teaching techniques from her, even though she probably didn't know that. But I used them later on in the classes that I've taught here at the university, and Now she is also the dean of the College of Ed. During that time, she was not the dean; she was a professor, but she's the dean now, and I appreciate all of the things that I learned from them.
Do you think HBCUs are important? Why or why not?
I definitely think that HBCUs are important. For one thing, the proof, the proof of the power of an HBCU is really in the success of its graduates. For example, you have, excuse me, for example, I remember the Honorable Barbara Jordan, who was a legislator, and she graduated from TSU. I met her once when I was traveling. I went to Austin, Texas for a conference, and I was very young then. I was in undergrad then here at TSU, and I actually met her and spoke with her for a few minutes. And then you have people like Alex Haley, and he's a great author, and he graduated from Alcorn State, and then you had Andrew Young, who was a UN ambassador and a mayor of Atlanta, and graduated from Howard. That's right, he graduated from Howard University. And all of these are HBCUs. The Honorable Roderick Page, he was the U.S. Secretary of Education, and he graduated from Jackson State. And then Thurgood Marshall, I know everybody's heard about him, Supreme Court Justice, graduated from Lincoln University. And then, of course, Oprah Winfrey, everybody knows her, and the talk show host, and of course, she's a philanthropist, and she graduated from Tennessee State. Yeah, Tennessee State. And let's see, guy's name Sean P. Diddy Combs. He's the founder. He's made a lot of money. He's the founder and CEO of Bad Boy Entertainment, and he graduated from Howard. So, I could just go on and about the different people who have graduated, successful people, I might say, that graduated from HBCUs. And another reason is because HBCUs strengthen families. I've noticed that people who graduate from HBCUs a lot of times send their children to HBCUs, and the children are there, their kids are there, and they're able to experience some of the atmosphere that their parents experience. They may be walking down the pathway or the hallways, the same hallways that their parents walked down, sitting in lecture halls or classes, the same ones where their parents were, sat when they were learning. And I think that's important to a lot of families who have graduated, parents who have graduated, from HBCUs. I think that it is important.
Since your experience at Texas Southern, how has your life changed or been impacted from the lessons learned here?
I could say that I was hired as Associate Dean of Students in 2002, and here in this very office. And then later, I was promoted to Assistant Vice President for Student Affairs. And so I think that is duly noted as far as, how I feel that I benefited, from this university.
Support your decision to come to TSU?
Yes, it was my mom. My dad was no longer living. He had passed away, but she was definitely happy. She was just happy that I was going to go to college, period. I mean, especially back in those days.
Do you think Texas Southern University has changed since you graduated, and in what way?
Definitely, because that was a long time ago. See, the first time I graduated from TSU was in 1973. So you can imagine how many changes have happened. We've had physical aesthetic changes like um, new buildings, parking garages, new housing, all things like that, and the population has changed somewhat as well, and so yes, I can think of that for sure. Those are the type of changes, and also um, the new degree programs as well that have come about since the time when I was here.
Due to the increasing problems in gun violence here on campus, will there be any suggestions you would give to decrease these incidents or problems?
Actually, probably not, because I believe that the current administration has addressed these issues, this specific issue, by increasing security for the campus and the outside perimeters of the campus. So I think with that, I would say they have done basically what should have been done to address the security measures for the university, for the students.
Thank you again for allowing me to interview you.
You're welcome.